So I just wanted to make this video in particular because certain circumstances have occurred recently, and I've read some articles recently too, whereby I could theoretically see Jeff Horn not actually fighting Terrence Crawford as has been kind of proposed, um, since Horn beat Pacquiao basically, and a lot of people are kind of looking forward to a potential Horn versus Crawford fight. I think most people just kind of see it as Crawford's kind of like step up into the welterweight class as really opposed to being anything else. I think a lot of people don't really give Horn much of a shot at beating Crawford. I do personally, but that's not necessarily the point of this video. I do think that from Horn's perspective, however, and with some of the things that I've read and heard about the whole situation, I could see him just vacating the welterweight title and or just not fighting Crawford to begin with. I could see him doing that. And from his perspective, to be honest, I think that actually might be the right move. And not only would it work for him, but actually, funny enough, I think it would probably work for Crawford and for Top Rank as well. Because if Horn refuses to fight Crawford and or gets stripped or drops the belt entirely and moves up to light welterweight or light middleweight, excuse me, um, there's a perfectly acceptable, a perfectly sellable fight with Saddam Ali there. Ali and Golden Boy, he's a Golden Boy fighter, would, I think, be very, very willing to fight Jeff Horn in Australia or wherever the hell else Horn would want that fight. Horn wouldn't have to travel for that fight, and he wouldn't necessarily have to worry about if the fight is close. I mean, he may still to a degree with Ali, but with when it comes to fighting a top ranked star and a top ranked card, and not only that, but on top of the fact that a lot of people, rightly or wrongly in my opinion, dead ass wrongly, would consider the scores of the Pacquiao versus Horn fight to be like, oh, like Horn got a gift decision against Pacquiao. Why you'd give a gift decision to somebody like Jeff Horn is beyond me. But yeah, I guess you could say like, oh, he was a big underdog, so you could make, bet all this money on him and make a lot of money in the aftermath or whatever. As though you couldn't make way more money just promoting fucking Pacquiao as like the god of boxing, like people have acted like for the past decade. But aside from that, that a lot of that carries over often into your next fight. When judges do feel that a fighter has been wronged or a given fighter has been given a gift in one fight, a lot of the times the judges for the next fight, whether they're the same judges or not, usually they're not, will oftentimes almost overcorrect, almost like when like if you swerve your car in one way, like you'll overcorrect to get back into the same lane that you were in. And a lot of times judges will do that. Like if you just look at Lennox Lewis versus Evander Holyfield, the first fight was looked at as a terrible robbery that Lewis, boxed the shit out of Holyfield, and that there's no way in fucking hell it was a drawish type fight. And then the second fight was closer, but they scored it way wider, as though Lewis completely dominated Holyfield the same way that he had done in the first fight. That's just one example. There's a few others out there. I would say that another good example would be what happened with Pacquiao. A lot of people felt like Pacquiao got a shitty decision. He did one that he didn't deserve to win in the third Marquez fight, and so that carried over into the Tim Bradley fight. Bradley wound up getting more of the benefit of the doubt because the judges were scrutinizing Pacquiao more heavily in that fight. And then from then on, I think it kind of carried over to Bradley as well. But things like that will happen. Like one fight will carry over to the next one. So even aside from the fact that Terrence Crawford is like this big star and he's the favorite fighter and he's the guy that would be more likely to get the benefit of the doubt simply by virtue of his rising star, as well as the fact that he'd be that in-house fighter, the in-house top-ranked fighter, the in-house kind of guy on the rise, the A side, all that good stuff. There's also the fact that there's a perception out there that Horn got a decision that he didn't necessarily deserve, and so that may play into the hands of the judges, especially if they are fighting in the U.S., which would be, I'd imagine, the most likely situation. Maybe in Australia it'd be a little bit different, but even still, I think there's just a higher risk of Horn getting screwed on scorecards against Crawford than there would be against Ali. Just from past circumstances with regards to Top Rank as opposed to Golden Boy, and especially Golden Boy post Al Heyman. But like to me that fight, Crawford versus Horn, I favor Crawford. So unless Horn is able to just dominate and win like a 9-3, 10-2 type of decision over Crawford, he would probably wind up getting like a 6-6, 7-5 type decision over Crawford. Like basically, like any close round would be going to Crawford in that case. So I really, like, in order to preserve his own sellability, his own kind of rising tide, his own kind of rising star, his own ability to continue to make solid paydays, $500,000 or $1 million plus paydays in the near future, I think it would be smarter for him to fight somebody like a Mundine if Mundine is able to win in his next upcoming fight. And when is that fight, matter of fact? But and then beyond that, just say like screw it to welterweight. It's a weight that he hardly is able to make in the first damn place. He could just move up to 154, be much healthier. He wouldn't have to lose almost 9 pounds with a day left to go for the weigh-in. He may just have to lose a couple, if that. I think he just trained like crap for Corcoran, though. To be honest, I don't think he's that big of a 147 pounder. He's a fairly solid big guy for welterweight for sure, but I think he just trained like crap for Corcoran because it wasn't as big of an occasion as Pacquiao was. It wasn't the fight of his life, so to speak, as Pacquiao was, and as Crawford I think would be. And I think he would train better for Crawford, and he would give Crawford a sterner test than a lot of people are kind of proposing that he would. But even then, I would still favor Crawford to beat him, to outbox him. But even with that, though, like Saddam Ali is a guy that's been chinny in the past. He's a guy that's not necessarily the most overtly physical guy. So I think that Horn would be able to kind of outmuscle him in spots. The primary danger that would be from Ali would just be his punching power, just kind of and his fast hands. The same way he was able to catch Cotto repeatedly. Round after round, would be a similar situation there. And if Ali was, from Golden Boy and Ali's perspective, if Ali were to beat Horn, they could be like, hey, we beat the guy that beat Pacquiao. We beat the guy that beat this great pound for pounder ATG legend and what have you. As well as the fact that Ali and Golden Boy, I doubt, are going to be looking to just fight the biggest, baddest opponents out there. I very well see in his future being the likes of Liam Williams, Liam Smith, Antonio Margarito's rated by the WBO, so I could see them fighting him. Just guys like that. So Jeff Horn, I think, would fit in very well into that equation. Even though I'd give Horn a solid chance, and I think from Horn's perspective, they see Ali as being somebody that's very beatable. I think from Ali's perspective, they see Horn as being very beatable as well, considering his kind of lackluster performance against Corcoran, where he got caught numerous times. I think Ali would kind of fancy his chances at being able to catch Horn in much the same fashion, albeit with faster hands and bigger power. So, he may be able to cause a very explosive ending of Jeff Horn. And then from Horn's perspective, Ali has shown his weaknesses a bit more glaringly in the past, considering the fact that he was knocked out by Jesse Vargas. And even after the Vargas fight, he had a lot of issues with much lower level of competition, guys that were able to give him just really, really difficult fights, much more so than you would expect from somebody of Ali's caliber. But honestly, I haven't even gotten to it yet. The way that this would actually work out really well for Top Rank would be in the matter of if Horn just vacates the WBO title entirely, whole cloth. I don't even know why I said that shit. If he just vacates it entirely, then Terrence Crawford that would most likely fight the number one contender for the WBO. Who was the number one contender for the WBO? Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. So, at the end of the day, Top Rank would get what they originally intended on in the first place with Pacquiao. They expected Pacquiao to beat Horn, and then for him to fight Terrence Crawford in kind of that passing of the torch, or proposed passing of the torch, after the fact. So, if Horn just vacates it entirely, it's most likely that the WBO would sanction Manny Pacquiao versus Terrence Crawford for the vacant belt. The number two contender is Lucas Matisse, but Lucas Matisse is already going a different route. He's going to be fighting Terak Kiram, aka what's the guy's Kratin Dangjin. I can't think of the guy's promotional first name, but something or other Kratin Dangjin for the. I think it's the interim or the regular WBA title, and then the winner of that basically becomes the mandatory for Keith Thurman. In the near future, good fight there too. That's a really good fight. I'll have to do a preview on that one. But that like, because of that, since Matisse, the number 2 contender, would be going elsewhere in the first place before this fight even potentially gets made, I could very well see Manny Pacquiao versus Terence Crawford for the vacant WBO welterweight title. It would still be a big clash. It would still be, Pacquiao's stock hasn't necessarily gone down entirely from the Jeff Horn fight. It's gone down in certain people's equations, the people that were looking at it from like, damn, like Horn was able to kind of bully Pacquiao, kind of outboxed him, and that scored the fight for Horn. But there's still quite a few people that still see Pacquiao as like the uncrowned champion who lost his title by, kind of robbery or bad means or bad judging or what have you. That would still like to see him against Terence Crawford. There's a lot of people that still think that Pacquiao's too much for Terence Crawford. So there's still that equation out there. There's still that level of fandom out there. Where it shows that Pacquiao Crawford is just as sellable a fight as Horn Crawford is, and maybe even more so. Just by virtue of how many fans Pacquiao has always brought to the sport and how many fans he still brings, regardless of his age, regardless of the recent losses that he's had, and regardless of the loss to Horn itself. So, really, I think it probably works out for everybody involved because Horn maintains his sellability. If he just vacates the title, moves up. And Pacquiao and Horn and Crawford still each get a very big payday, potentially even bigger than Crawford versus Horn would be. From Crawford's perspective, he probably makes more money against Pacquiao than he would have against Horn. And then Top Rank gets to have their big fight in Vegas or Omaha or wherever they happen to hold it, as opposed to having to argue and fight with Jeff Horn as to whether it's going to be in Australia or not. So honestly, I think it might work out for everybody involved if Horn just says fuck it, drops the belt like a proverbial Riddick Bowe, and goes elsewhere with his talents. Elsewhere, I'd imagine being for the WBO light middleweight championship against Saddam Ali, and then ultimately it works out for Ali, it works out for Horn, it works out for Pacquiao, it works out for Crawford, it works out for Top Rank. I think it works out. Honestly, the best for everybody involved. So, as fate may have it, I just kind of see that as being a very distinct possibility and something that ultimately I think. I'm sure Horn will get a fair amount of shit for it, but at the same time, if you look at it from his perspective, it makes sense, and ultimately, I do think that it kind of makes dollars and cents for everybody involved. Everybody involved. For ultimately, I guess the sport as a whole, and for the fans as a whole as well, regardless of who you happen to be a fan of. So that's it. That's all there is to it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.